So it's a difficult place for me right now because there's been some phenomenal talkers and presenters and lots of different stats and graphs, and so I'm going to try and talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts and what we've achieved at Manly in a fairly short period. Just a bit about myself. I'm a sports physio background. I've moved across from South Africa 18 years ago. I have a private practice in North Sydney. And a satellite clinic at Manly, and currently studying a Masters in Football Performance and Sports Science at Victoria University. So last year was a culmination of some phenomenal events at the club, and Peter's alluded to a fantastic year for us. And it's kind of, for me, it's like watching a movie where they start with the murder and then they wind you back to the beginning, and hopefully it's not the end for Manly and we'll kick on and do greater things. But I wanted to just share this video with you just to kickstart things and maybe wake a few people up. No sound. Okay, so look, for me personally, my passion has always been driven by these three words, and there'll be a lot of physiotherapists, I guess, in the audience, coaches, people that work at clubs, and I've always been quite amazed at, the lack of duty of care that exists, and I think that all of us have this moral, ethical, whatever it may be, a duty of care towards our players, and every player that plays football for our clubs deserves to be looked after. And I think that's kind of the basis of where I come from in terms of what I've tried to build and what the club have actually helped me build. The culture of the club is absolutely essential, and I'm really, really fortunate that the club and its makeup, running from the board to the CEO to the technical director and the football department, and then the player welfare staff, have been absolutely instrumental in helping me create a player welfare platform that we believe is pretty exceptional. And of course the players and parents play a massive role, and we know that particularly in the youth and Skills Act areas, the parents, it's a pay-for-player service. They pay a lot of money, and therefore they have a right and an obligation to get involved. And however, I sometimes get a bit confused at some of the views that you see and the stance some people take, and the way they infiltrate the culture of a club. And again, it doesn't surprise me when you travel around the traps and you see the behaviour of coaching staff and and parents and players, and that kind of always sets the tone for me, and I always feel like the culture can't be too good at this club. So I just felt like I needed to touch on that, because I think that if you're trying to build something, you need the right culture, and part of that is education, and I'll touch on that a bit later. There's been, I think Kate alluded to this. I love this little cartoon, because I think we as physios, play welfare staff, sports science, strength and conditioners, we're often deemed to be the enemy. We're there to stop players from playing. We're always arguing and fighting with everyone. Yet the view in my mind is that the coaching and player welfare department, the technical football department, and the medical, whatever you want to call it, they have to work hand in hand. I love this picture I found a while ago, because it reminded me of a situation again where, you know, we as physios or medical staff are always getting in the way of players and coaches going back to play. And really the truth is, you know, the furthest from that. And what I've tried very hard to do at Manly is to create this bond and this link between the coaching department and the player welfare department, which then breeds success. And I think that if there's a real take home for any one of you that are going and wanting to try and implement a program and change things, if you do not have your coaching staff on board and your technical director on board, who by the way is sitting in the audience today, I'm very proud that he made it out here, and there's trials going on at our club, and he's seen this has been very important for his presence, and that's the relationship that we have. And I think that if you don't have those relationships, you're going to struggle. But my view, and you know, this little picture on coming together is the beginning. That's where I started with, you know, Craig Mitchley and Jimmy Van Buren 4 years ago, and keeping that togetherness in progress, and then finally working together in success is part of why I believe the club is so responsible, and there's lots of reasons why the club is responsible, and this is just one very small one. Those that are in the audience that look at periodization cycles, this is for me, I guess, you know, the macro, where you're looking at the club from above and how it functions and works, and the structure within. And I bring this to fore again because I think that it's, and believe that it's, as head of player welfare, or whatever you want to call it, you give yourself a title, you need to understand the mechanisms of the club, and you need to be an integral player at the club. You can't be a silent person on the sidelines that is only there to offer weekend services. You really have to wrap yourself into it. You've got to get to know people, and there's got to be a real trust and understanding as to what you're wanting to build at a club. And if there's a break in any one of these little arrows, the program will stutter and stumble. And again, whatever I present to the technical director, and he doesn't always buy into everything I say, but if he agrees, we then go to the CEO and the board, we need sign off, and often the buy-in is always, in most cases, very positive. You know, there is pushback with certain things, but in general that works really well. If we come down a scale to more of a, let's talk about a mesocycle, just a monthly, a smaller cycle, and we get down to the nitty-gritties of the football department. Again, the same thing evolves, and my relationship, as I've alluded to earlier, with the technical staff and the coaching department and the parents is massive, because part of our biggest struggle is to educate parents in this phase and get them to understand why player welfare is so important. And obviously the player is the most important part of all of this, and they will benefit, whether it's in performance or in reducing risk of injury. So what do we do at Manly? This is just, it's a very busy slide, sorry, but we started slow. We had a physiotherapy department, and I'll get into the details of what we do there. My studies in sports science and what I'm doing in terms of load monitoring, and that's why I went to study, because I felt it was an area that I really needed to understand a little bit better. And so we've started a whole aspect of sports science at the club. We're very lucky and privileged to have Adam Waterson, who was actually mentioned in one of the earlier slides as written in the paper, who was the strength and conditioning coach at Western Sydney Wanderers in their first 3 and probably most successful years. And Adam, again, this is part of the process. Adam has always been a one-night-a-week guy. He used to come down and do football conditioning. I've then gone to our technical director, Warren, and asked for a second night, and I really felt that we needed a bigger strength and conditioning department and to be doing more in creating the so-called robust footballer. That's gone back to CEO level and board level where they've agreed, and now we have Adam 2 nights a week. We have greater expertise at the club, and that will only enhance a whole range of different aspects within the club. The yellow aspect is one of the pushbacks, and that's, you also learn to fight your battles, and I tend to ask for too much too quickly at times, and Warren will probably agree with that, but I wanted to bring GPS into the club and strength and conditioning equipment, and in the end we had to make a decision to do one or the other because we couldn't afford both. Obviously, as you would all know, we don't have resources like the A-League or professional clubs. So it's still on my hit list, and it is something that we will do in the near future. So that's just an overview of the player welfare aspect of what we do at Manly. So again, now I'm going to go into a micro level and just talk about what the program actually does and offers. So we started with physiotherapy, and when I took over, the physio services were basic. Weekend work, a couple of physios prancing around doing their thing. And I thought, no, this has got to get better. So we took that on board, we looked at the budgets, we manipulated them, and we freed up some funding, and what that allowed for was for us to build on that and offer services outside of just weekend work at no extra cost. And from that, we've managed to streamline services. We offer physiotherapy, treatment and rehabilitation on site at the club 5 days a week. And we run a clinic there, which in some aspects is a paid for treatment service for the youth and for Skills Act. And we offer that rate at a very reduced rate just to cover off on some of the expenses and costs involved. But also really, again, there was a lot of talking about return to train and return to play. Kate spoke about, I'm a bit tired of physios saying, okay, we'll jump on that ankle 5 times, you're ready to play. That's not the way it works. And so players have to be reintegrated back into a program. There has to be a proper return to train play protocol, and the player has to meet criteria both clinically and physically and psychologically to go back into a program. So all our players will follow these criteria, and from this we've built a proper protocol. So parents know that if they do send a kid or a player elsewhere for treatment, the physio staff at the club will have final say on reintegration. And that way, we prevent further injury from occurring. Again, this is a hot topic at the moment. We started off screening, too costly, too time consuming. And I don't believe it was giving us much more than just profiling and doing musculoskeletal questionnaires, which we do. We have a database of every single player in the club. So I could walk out on field and I would know almost every single player by name and what injury they have. And so we have that database available. In the senior grades, we do some screening, but generally we just do questionnaires, and it's probably something that I would suggest you do rather than trying to screen 500 players, especially at sub-elite level. Injury surveillance, again, it's been spoken about all afternoon and all morning. You have got to do your injury surveillance. We use basic spreadsheets, we use Dropbox, we integrate all these programs so that all our staff are aware of what injuries any player has, what type of injury, where it occurred, etc., etc. So we have that base to work off. Our maturation program, again, this is one of my really important areas and where I will do my research next year. So when I took over, they were measuring kids on the side of doors, and I think they used the 1 centimetre mark to say, oh, you've grown a centimetre, or whoopee, you've grown. Well, what does that mean? So we took that over, and we then started the maturity offset calculator, and we look at seated height, standing height, and weight, and we look at where every kid is in the program in terms of their maturation. We then, from that, will have discussions around load, and again, the science is not that strong, although there are some papers that suggest that those kids that are in their PHV or peak height or accelerated growth spurts probably have a greater tendency of getting injured. Again, I'll take you back to my discussions with coaching staff and the technical director. There's never ever an argument at this level of football where we're in the development phase about us holding someone back in terms of profiling them and reducing their risk of injury. So our maturation program is pretty big. I know they're doing measuring today, which is a great initiative from Football New South Wales, because I think the RAE program, whilst it's unbelievably important, is abused. And I think that you need to be picking these kids for the right reasons. They need to be biologically smaller, and I think that if they're going to play down a year, we manage them in the right way, and that we give them sufficient opportunity to train with their chronological age group. So just playing a kid down for 3 or 4 years, our belief is you will end up destroying them. So whilst you're helping them, you need to let them train with their chronological age group at least once a week so they don't lose touch. Training loads, again spoken about dramatically all day. We do training loads in the senior program. We look at session RPEs. We use Tim Gabbett's work on acute chronic loads. In this area, again, when I go to senior coaching staff to say there's someone that's moving into that overreach zone, there's never ever an argument about decreasing loads. We're running a pilot currently, which I'm not convinced is where we need to be in the youth. So for the first time ever, we are looking at weekly session RPEs for our youth, our boys' youth at the moment. Asking a 13-year-old an RPE is a challenge. We've tried to educate, we talk to them continually about what it is and what they should be giving. A 13-year-old has a real issue with describing the difference between having worked hard and trying their best, and that becomes quite difficult, and I believe will really affect the research in that space. However, we will look at it as a pilot for the 6-week period, and if we feel that it's given us some relatively good information, we will probably continue with it for the season. The biggest area here that worries me and should worry most of you that are in this area is exposure rates outside of the club. What are our kids doing away from us? Because we cannot control that. And again, it's a debate we're having right now. I've got some of our youth having 7 or 8 hit-outs a week. They're playing futsal, summer football, 3 nights a week with us. Playing Saturday, we've got our first game on Sunday. What I do with these kids that have gone from 3 sessions to 7 sessions in 1 week, and we spoke, very smart people in this room spoke about increasing and spiking loads, and these are in 13, 14-year-old boys who may be in the accelerated growth period. So again, it's discussions I have with Warren and the coaching staff. They will always be supportive, and currently we're talking about dropping 1 night away, just simply because we feel that we need to protect these kids just a little bit. Not wrap them in cotton wool, because we can't stop them from playing futsal and summer football. So these are the things that are going on in terms of loads. Prehab, again, spoken about. I got back from one of my trips to Europe a few years ago, and I was absolutely hell-bent that we needed to start a prehab program. Again, I sold it to the coaching staff, who then went above. We got sign-off, and so the prehab program runs for 30 minutes. Every player in the club will do the FIFA 11 plus running component for 15 minutes, which is followed by a conditioning 15-minute segment. And we started last year in the Skills Act program, where I watered that down into a mini FIFA 11 plus and a little bit of strength work for them, because as Kate alluded to, there are windows of opportunity with kids. And there should be no reason why you can't do plyometrics with 8 and 9-year-olds if it's done properly, because the gains for them in that phase would be greater than someone who's 15 or 16. So this is what we've tried to do at the club, and everyone will be involved in prehab. By the way, I can't even contemplate splitting that up at the moment. So in terms of having an earlier segment and a later segment, so I'd have to apologise to Rick for that. But it's something that we have looked at in terms of creating robustness, and certainly some of our players with hamstring problems, we do eccentric work with them after training. Recovery, Rob spoke a lot about it. We speak a lot about nutrition, sleep. We have cold water immersion baths. I'll get onto that in a moment. We speak a lot in these areas in terms of nutrition and recovery. And the last component was, of course, the strength and conditioning, which we've now managed to bring into the club, which I'm really excited about for this 2018 season. So lots of this spoken about, but that's our model. And happy for anyone to take whatever they want from it. But that's what we've built over. We're going into the 4th season now, and that's what we've managed to achieve with the right culture at the club, which I think is pretty significant. So how do I do this? I'm unbelievably fortunate to have amazing staff, and I've got a couple of my staff here tonight, this afternoon, sorry. We have a huge group. I've managed to tie into the Australian Catholic University Physiotherapy Department. We train and utilise a lot of the students at the university. Again, it's something I would strongly suggest you all do, is tap into the universities around you. Currently talking to Rob about UTS and sports science, and hoping to get some sports science interns, which helps with our budgets. They all want to learn. The students really, I've got one student here with me now who's qualifying in a few weeks. He's been with me from first year, and he will go on now and work in the senior space. He's had 4 years at the club, or 3.5 years at the club. So staff is imperative. Facilities, we're lucky down on the beaches, so we use the baths down at some of the ocean pools for recovery. Again, the 1%er that Rob spoke about, I believe in, and I really feel that it has a place at our club. Again, I went to the board and the club and the CEO, and they approved purchasing some ice baths for us, which we have in the sheds and get used all the time. Our maturation program, again, we started with basics. I then went to the board and said, look, if I'm going to do this properly, I need the right equipment, which they purchased. So again, you can see the value they place in player welfare at the club. Using the facilities, I know I was talking to Charlie earlier about how poor the facilities are at his club. We're very, very fortunate down in Cromer, unbelievably fortunate. We're having our second Astro put in, which will go live in January, I believe. We've got 6 fields, everyone trains on the same facility, and that's why it allows us to run the services we do. But you can see from the pictures there that we use the clubhouse for some of our prehab and recovery sessions. Prehab, great picture of perturbation. Those are under 13s last year doing perturbation work for ACL. Physiotherapy services we've spoken about, not just on-field and clinic, but we do a lot of on-field conditioning. So the picture you see there in the middle is a young man by the name of Jacob Trzynski, and I've got his permission to mention this. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumour in August 2016. He's now in full remission. We've RA'd him back into the 16s because he missed, I think, 80% of the season, but he did all his on-field conditioning with us, and that's a picture of him just starting his comeback trail. So we, the physio staff and the strength and conditioning staff, will do all of that, and when we feel the player is ready, we'll then transition him back into training. As Kate spoke about, we would start with non-contact environments. We will pick and choose which scenarios they get involved in. They would be floaters, bouncers, etc., and then we would build from there. For myself personally, going back to university, learning coming today, surrounding myself with people that are smarter and know more than me is really important. My research at the moment is through Vic University and UTS, so Rob will also help me. Travelling abroad, I've been really fortunate to travel to some of the biggest clubs and also some of the smallest clubs, and I try and do that on an annual basis, although my wife's put a stop to that now. So, whatever I do, whenever I go, even I spent some really unbelievable time at Real Madrid, and look, they have everything that locks, closes, pushes. It's unbelievable, but I still managed to take something away. And even if you go to clubs that have unbelievable budgets in player welfare, there will be certain things that you look at and think, oh gosh, I can implement that. And then lastly, I think going back to your own communities and tapping in, like resources. The top picture is of a gentleman who owns a facility called Altitude Fitness. He has an altitude chamber and a hyperbaric chamber. We did a contra deal with him through last season for our senior squads, and we would go there to do conditioning sessions, and a number of our injured players would go to the hyperbaric chamber, and that was a contra deal that would cost the club anything. So, and going back into your communities and having a look around what's available, you'll be very surprised at people who are wanting to get involved with the club, which would make your lives a lot easier. We've also brought people in like Aileen Clues, who's a sports and performance psychologist, nutritionist, to talk to our players. So that's basically how we do it. This is the why. I guess we look at our surveillance carefully, we look at our data carefully, we analyse, and then we plan. So if we see a significant amount of knee injuries that would concern us, so Charlie spoke about stress fractures. In my first year at Manly, we had 6, all in the youth, all males, all lumbar. We had 1 bone stress in the heel. My second year, nothing. Third year, we had 1. And ACLs, my first year, none. Last year, we had 4, 3 in the women's space, but last year was our first year where our program was taken on board in the female space, and this last season we had 1. So there has been success in all those areas, I believe, because of what we're doing in injury prevention. I know that's a buzzword now, risk reduction, whatever you want to call it, but whatever we're doing is working dramatically. So here's a video, again, just having a look inside of what the player welfare staff do at Manly.
Getting on the internet and checking a new hit again. First shot, strut walking, a little bit of humble, a little bit of cautious. Somewhere between like Rocky and Cosby's for the game. Nope, y'all can't copy it. Bad, moonwalking in this gear. It's a party. My posse's been on Broadway, and we did it all like pro music. I shed my skin and put my bones into everything I record to it. And yeah, I'm on like that stage light, going to shine on down. Got that Bob Barker suit game and Blinko with my style. Money, stay on my craft and stick around. Pounds, but I do that to pass the torch and put on for my town. Trust me, on my INDEPENDENT shit hustling. Chasing dreams since I was 14 with the 4-track bustin'. Halfway across that city with the question. Labels out here, now they can't tell me nothing. We give that to the people, spread it across the country. Labels out here, now they can't tell me nothing. We give it to the people, spread it across the country.
Here we go back, this is the moment, tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us. Here we go back, this is the moment tonight.
So take home messages. Do the 20% well. It's something I learned many years ago. Like, I don't know, I continually fall into this trap because I try and do too much. You end up driving yourself over an edge, but just do the basics well and build. Don't try and do too much. And I think whatever you're doing back at your club, make a small adjustment. And whatever that small adjustment is, I believe will make a difference. And then build on that. Manipulate the budget. So you're not going to get a lot of money in player welfare. Player welfare is the last, you know, and they always, when they go to cut budgets, it's the first places they go, always. So you need to move things around. None of us do this. I think Kate spoke about it. We don't do this for the money. We do it because we're passionate and we love what we do. But I really feel that if you get the right people involved that love what they do, it'll work. And then educate, I think probably the biggest point here is you need to educate staff, you need to educate coaching staff so that they're not fearful of what you're trying to do and they buy in to the process. Also remember, we don't know it all. I learn from coaches every day. They have a lot. They have a lot to teach us as well in understanding football, because if you're going to work in football, you need to understand the game. You need to understand what BPO is and BP is and what a floater is. And these are because you need to speak their language. When you speak a coach's language, he will respect you or she will respect you. If you have no idea what's going on in terms of what they're doing on field, it will make your job a lot harder. So I believe I've come to an end. I thank you all very much for your time. I don't know if there's any time for questions.
Please.